task force must be made public. As NBC's John Cochran reports now, Hillary Clinton is getting no shortage of attention.
First Lady doesn't do just health care. Today she was concerned about civil rights. She gets involved in lots of decisions about lots of policies. Our new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows the country is still split on whether she should be involved in major decisions.
She wasn't the one who was elected. I mean, just being the president's wife shouldn't really entitle her to being that close to the decision making.
I really don't like her, and I think she's a little brash and comes out a little too strong.
I think the advice of a smart, competent woman is always welcome wherever it is. So I think she's fine.
She should have some kind of input. Giving a woman's point of view always helps.
Most people in our poll have positive feelings about Mrs. Clinton.
I think Nancy Reagan had influence whispering from behind the curtain, and Hillary Clinton has influence in a more legitimate way, and I think it's great.
She will need that popularity when she tries to sell the new health care plan to the country a few months from now. She is respected on Capitol Hill for the way she has taken charge of the health task force. She is even popular among conservatives. No, wait a minute, that's not quite right. Let's try that again. A lot of people in Congress admire her, and just about everyone is scared of her. Scared because she has real power and isn't afraid to use it. A lot of congressmen are also spooked because it is politically incorrect in this feminist age to suggest that possibly the First Lady has too much power. Conservative activist Phyllis Schlafly openly complains that Hillary Clinton is a left-winger. Others complain she is also pushy.
But I think as time goes on, people see some evidence of some aggressiveness that obviously they may not like, and certainly may not like over long term.
And that really is the question. Will Hillary Clinton be judged on whether she is pushy or on the programs she pushes? John Cochran, NBC News, Washington.
As you may know, the president put his wife in charge of a task force to redesign the nation's health care system. A federal judge today limited the authority of that task force to hold closed meetings. The decision is based on a 1972 law covering federal committees, which forbids holding closed meetings if they include a private citizen, that is, someone who is not a government employee. The idea is to keep special interests out of closed meetings so that they won't exercise undue influence on federal decision-making. Since Hillary Clinton is not formally a government employee, two healthcare organizations and a public interest group took the issue to court, hence today's decision. It may seem petty, even a little silly, but it reflects the concern of some groups and individuals that Mrs. Clinton's undefined role could lend itself to abuse, or at least the uncontrolled exercise of power. My colleague Chris Bury and producer Lisa Koenig have been working for some weeks now on documenting this new First Lady's style and impact and role. Today's news gives us an interesting starting point.
From her very first day on the job, when the White House was open to the public, it was perfectly clear Hillary Clinton had a certain panache for tackling problems.
Here's the problem, is that for reasons unknown to us, they opened the gates and let people with app tickets in, and we just screwed all these people.
We got swarmed, so we are setting up the sound system outside.
Yeah, but here's what I just told Wendy. I want the people with the tickets brought in. That's what...
Mrs. Clinton sized up the trouble, buttonholed her husband, and together they finessed it. In this case, going outside to reassure ticket holders.
To honor the contest, we need everybody with a ticket to come up to the front.
It is that very take charge quality that has been at the heart of the debate over Hillary Clinton's leadership of the health care task force. It is a quality the president obviously relies upon.
We have a first lady of many talents, but who most of all can bring people together around complex and difficult issues to hammer out consensus and get things done.
But in naming Hillary Clinton to hammer out health care reform, the president may not have done his wife any favors. It is, after all, an $800 billion monster that no one has been able to tame, and Mrs. Clinton's task force is supposed to figure it out by a May deadline.
The deadline was established by the president, and the president means business, and we will meet the deadline, yes.
Hillary Clinton, too, seems to mean business. When not meeting behind closed doors, she's up on Capitol Hill. In a string of no-nonsense performances, she crashed the all-boys leadership club, lobbied both sides of the aisle, and scored major points for just listening. grown congressmen gushed.
She's very effective and very believable on this subject. She knows it, she's dealt with it, she cares about it.
They raved about her mastery of the problem, her poise, her perfect manners. In public, Hillary Clinton is careful not to step on congressional egos.
I'm just following my leader.
And ever so cautious about stealing the stage from her husband.
As the president said last night, on behalf of the president, to do what my husband asked me to do. That's what I'm going to try to do.
At first, Republicans, too, professed to be pleased with Mrs. Clinton, but the honeymoon did not last. Now the leadership complains her cooperation has been so much window dressing.
The fact that somebody can take notes in a legal pad and nod their head yes while listening doesn't mean anything. I mean, if you're taken in by that in this business, you're not going to survive very long.
In fact, Republicans point to a White House memo from advisor Ira Magaziner, who reports to Hillary Clinton as evidence the task force has already made up its mind. The memo outlines a plan for managed competition that would cost up to $90 billion more a year. It would be largely paid for with higher taxes on alcohol, tobacco, and guns. Details Hillary Clinton tends to dodge.
We're looking at all the options that are available.
Including alcohol?
We're looking at all the options that are available.
In selling health care reform, Hillary Clinton has taken a page from the president's book and returned to the campaign trail. Like her husband, Mrs. Clinton is a hit in public, if not the natural politician he is, and like him, she is a serious policy wonk.
One of the real issues as you move toward a competitive system is how you have a system that is multi-tiered and not just specialist-driven, not just institutionally driven in a way that eliminates a lot of the preventive services at the community level.
Her method is to take copious notes to the point of obvious fatigue and to listen, cameras rolling, to sad story after sad story about individual failures in the system.
What is your daughter's chronic illness?
My daughter Miranda's over here. My daughter has cancer. She was diagnosed at the age of 3.
So far, Hillary Clinton has kept the task force plans to herself. Her public comments have been dry as dust, vague, neutral, nonpartisan. But on a visit to a working-class neighborhood in Boston, after hearing from people who had been denied medical coverage, the First Lady unloaded on the insurance industry.
It's almost as though they decided that nobody should ever get sick. We should all just drop dead without ever having been in the hospital.
For all the rich and powerful interests at stake in health care, Hillary Clinton and her task force have, until now, enjoyed a remarkable grace period, free from heavy political flack. But the federal judge's decision in Washington today is a clear signal that grace period has ended. The ruling from U.S. District Judge Royce Lamberth seems, at the very least, a symbolic setback. The judge ruled that some secret meetings of the task force violate open meeting laws precisely because a private citizen, Hillary Rodham Clinton, is in charge. The judge banned all secret fact-finding and fact-reporting meetings, but he also ruled the task force could meet in secret to advise the president or in small working groups. Today, Mr. Clinton, like the lawyer he is, put his best spin on the judge's ruling.
He ruled that they had to have some open meetings. The briefing I got was that he ruled that the assertions that, some of the assertions that were made were absolutely unconstitutional.
But late today, attorneys for the doctors and other health care groups which had sued Hillary Clinton's task force insisted the legal fight had just begun.
Why the privacy? I mean, I think it's an injustice to the American public, particularly over an issue that's going to potentially raise our taxes between $90 and $150 billion.
And other critics raise still another flag, that Hillary Clinton's powerful, though unpaid position may violate the anti-nepotism law. It was adopted after JFK named his brother Bobby Attorney General.
She should be given a job with a salary, even if it's only $1 a year, and subject to being called to Congress, interviewed by the press, and be treated just like another senior official.
As her critics crank up the volume, Hillary Clinton plans to keep on moving and listening, gathering allies along the way. She knows her enemies lie in waiting. The clock is running, and the stakes for her husband are high. This is Chris Bury for Nightline in Washington.
When we come back, we'll be joined by the man who filed the suit against Hillary Clinton's health care task force and by the White House Communications Director, George Stephanopoulos.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by AT&T.
Mr. Flaherty is a longtime conservative critic of Hillary Clinton. He joins us from our Washington bureau. Also joining us from our Washington bureau is George Stephanopoulos, the White House Director of Communications. Mr. Flaherty, let me begin by asking you, forgive me, I've never heard of your group before. How many people do you represent? How large a group is it?
We're a new group. We started last year, and our mission is to promote ethics in government, as you mentioned. We do that in part by distributing a code for ethics in government and by undertaking the type of action we're talking about tonight.
Okay, who are you? Are there 2 of you, 5 of you, 5,000
No,
of you?
we have 1,000 members, and it's growing every day.
Now, let me come at you from the critic's point of view of criticizing what you're doing. Seems a little bit petty. I mean, clearly the president's wife is trying to do the best she can, and if they need to have some meetings in private, does it really matter? I mean, you don't think the president's wife is going to be lobbying unfairly for some special interest group, do you?
No, I don't think she is, but I disagree that this is some kind of insignificant issue. This is not a group of advisors getting together once a week in the cabinet room to brief the president on their efforts. They've created this gargantuan structure with 300 or 400 people. There are 15 cluster groups, as they call them, kind of subcommittees of this thing. They've been tasked in 100 days to make decisions affecting the health care of every American, and I wonder whether they're going to mess it up. But that wasn't at issue in the suit today. The judge's ruling had to do with openness and conducting the public's business in public. It's very ironic to me, Ted, that special interest or that public interest law groups in this town, many of whom consider Hillary Clinton allies, have spent a couple decades building up this regime of openness. We have the Sunshine in Government Act, we have the Federal Advisory Committee Act. Now the administration comes forward, and when these things have to be applied against them, they say, oh, they're unconstitutional. Sounds to me like they're simply inconvenient to them.
George Stephanopoulos.
Well, I think, first of all, we have to put this all in context. From what Peter has said, this is one of the most open legislative drafting processes ever in American history. We have 400 people, healthcare professionals, congressional staff members, experts from around the country, all working on the process of putting together a piece of healthcare legislation. Usually this is the kind of thing that's done in a back room with a few special interests and a handful of people. We're branching out, making sure that the president gets the best advice possible. We've met with over 300 interest groups in over 100 separate meetings in the last several weeks. But let's also look at what the judge decided today. He essentially gave a seal of approval to everything the task force has done and everything the task force is planned to do. Let's look at it. First of all, he ruled that it is absolutely unconstitutional for the FACA to apply to the task force whenever the task force is formulating advice for the president. It's simply in the Constitution that the president has the right to receive advice from his advisors. He also said that this law does not apply at all to the working groups which are working on the legislation.
So they can meet privately?
The working groups can meet privately. The task force can meet privately whenever it is formulating advice for the president.
George,
that is grounded in the Constitution.
It's late at night, and I have a fear that eyes are going to start glazing over. I simply want to get in one more question or two to the both of you on this issue, and then let's broaden it out to discuss the First Lady's role in other areas. You regard what happened today in federal court, Mr. Flaherty, as a victory or a setback?
No, it's a victory. The judges said that despite Hillary Clinton's vast powers, she's not above the law. And until this point, the administration had been flaunting the law. Now, the judge did not go as far as we wanted him to go, and we're going to pursue that vigorously in court. We feel that these task forces, so where the deals are going to be cut, where the decisions are going to be made, and this process should take place in public. You know, George made mention of drafting legislation. Well, I thought the Congress drafted legislation, and I would think the Democrats in Congress, as well as the Republicans, would have some interest in what's going on during this process.
George.
Well, there are 90 congressional staff members working on the process. As you saw in your earlier report, Mrs. Clinton has spent hours and hours and hours on Capitol Hill working with the members of Congress. But let's be clear here, the president clearly has responsibilities in the Constitution to propose legislation. Once this legislation is presented to the Congress, we'll go through the full public hearings, schedule of public hearings. There will be opportunity for the public to respond at that point as well. At this point in the process, there has never been this much openness in such an undertaking.
Let us take a quick break right now, and then when we come back, Mr. Flaherty, I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on, generally speaking, the role that the First Lady is fulfilling and the degree to which you think she is or is not accountable, and then we'll have Mr. Stephanopoulos respond. We'll continue in just a moment. Again with Peter Flaherty and George Stephanopoulos. George, a little earlier we heard columnist Bob Novak say, why not pay the First Lady $1 a year and then make her subject to some kind of accountability, whether it's up on Capitol Hill, whether she has to go through some kind of a hearing process. I'm not quite sure what Bob meant, but
Neither am I, Ted. I think that's the problem.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I mean, first of all, as Bob knows, there are laws against hiring members of the president's family in a direct advisory role to the president. At the same time, the role of First Lady is well established in our history, and the president has the right, grounded in the Constitution, to seek the best advice he can from the best people he can. He's worked very closely with Mrs. Clinton over the last 20 years on matters of important public policy, and he trusts her to represent the people in this process, and that's why he's chosen to involve her. It's perfectly legal, it's grounded in the Constitution, and I think the American people are pleased with the idea that the president has put Mrs. Clinton, the person he trusts the most, the person he knows the best, to handle this big job.
Before I turn to Peter Flaherty, let me ask you to come back on a couple of points. You mentioned that it's well grounded in the Constitution, the First Lady's role. What does it say in the Constitution about the First Lady's role?
No, not the First Lady's role. The president's responsibility and right to choose his advisors, to get advice from whoever he chooses, is well grounded in the Constitution.
A little earlier, you said that the First Lady's role is sort of well grounded
in our history.
In our history. I would suggest to you that every single First Lady seems to put her own stamp on it, and I'm not sure that you could find two First Ladies who are similar in the way that they do the job, let alone identical.
Oh, there's no question about that, but all First Ladies have chosen important projects. Clearly, Mrs. Clinton is taking on a big job here for the president. The president has asked her to take on a very big job. But as we pointed out in the court case, the Congress and the president have provided for staffs for the First Ladies. They provided for the ability for the First Ladies to serve the president. Mrs. Clinton is clearly breaking new ground here with the Health Care Task Force, but it's an important job, and it's a job the president trusts her to do.
Why should we not, Peter Flaherty, regard this as one whale of a good deal? You know, the taxpayer doesn't have to pay Mrs. Clinton anymore. She is an enormously well-educated, well-trained, tough-minded woman. We're certainly getting more than our money's worth.
Well, that's what scares me. She's a very effective advocate for a point of view. Frankly, I wish she was a conservative and not a liberal. Our lawyer in court made a good point. He said, we're not talking about planting bushes by a highway here. Hillary Clinton has been given unprecedented power and authority. George Stephanopoulos conceded that we probably have never had a First Lady like this in the past, and I think it prompts a whole group of new issues. For instance, if she is a public official, if she has a staff and gets public funds, well, then that makes her subject to the anti-nepotism law, which would make her participation in this sort of thing illegal.
No. I think the point. I think the point that George was making is that all First Ladies have had a staff assigned to them. I mean, that's just. There's nothing unique about that. There's nothing unprecedented about that.
No, but the level of power that she's been accorded is unprecedented. She's been given 100 days to come up with a dramatic overhaul of our health care policy. I think this is a process that is best done in public. The Federal Advisory Committee Act does apply to the situation as the judge ruled, but, you know, maybe we can address the bigger issue. I think that this is an unprecedented situation, and I think you're going to see skirmishes of this type for 4 years if Hillary is intent on wielding the kind of power she apparently has.
And I think that Peter is actually focusing in on something here. This really isn't about Hillary Clinton. It's about health care. And Peter and the people he represents, I mean, he's a well-known Republican fundraiser, reactionary, who are trying to block progress on health care. They don't want to change the system. They don't want to create a system that will stop making profits for the insurance companies and start providing secure health care for every American.
The whole purpose of this suit was to allow us to have some input. There's no harm in having our staff people attend the meetings, and I assume there's no harm in us forwarding proposals to you.
And we've invited you to forward them. We hope you will forward proposals to the Healthcare Task Force, and we welcome the chance to review them.
Well, the initial signs aren't too good. I mean,
Peter, let me just interrupt for a moment, because I would like to find out from you whether there are other issues that you are concerned about, or whether you think this is a one-issue deal.
No, I'm very concerned about a number of things. There seems to be an insensitivity to open government over there at the White House. The president has not held a press conference yet. George Stephanopoulos has kicked C-SPAN out of the briefings that were being given.
All right, let's stay on Hillary Clinton, though.
Okay, let's stay on Hillary.
Go ahead.
Hillary may be responsible for the appointment of 2 members of the cabinet, one of whom is not yet confirmed. There have been reports in the newspaper that there's a formal process that she gets to clear the heads of the armed forces services, the Air Force, the Navy, and so forth. I think real questions can be raised about the amount of power she has. If she has this kind of power, she should be accountable. I think what a lot of Americans are worried about is that we have some kind of Imelda Marcos wielding power behind the scenes with absolutely no accountability.
Oh, that's just ridiculous. Mrs. Clinton has been all across the country meeting with the American people about health care. She's been meeting with the Congress in public about health care. This task force has held the most open process in American history for developing a major piece of legislation.
And everybody up on Capitol Hill everyone on Capitol Hill is walking on eggshells. Nobody wants to offend the president's wife because they know she's a very powerful woman. I'm not sure that's good for democracy.
What we heard the members of Congress on Capitol Hill saying is that, they are glad that we have an effective advocate for health care. They are glad to have the chance to work with Mrs. Clinton on this very important issue, and they are glad, finally, to have a president who's going to do something about health care, Republicans and Democrats alike.
George, in fairness, and we're down to our last 30 or 40 seconds, what else can they say publicly?
Well, I mean, if they had complaints, I'm certain that they've never been shy in the past about voicing those complaints. Anybody who saw the Republican convention knows that. The important point now is that Mrs. Clinton has been put in charge of a very important issue, providing health care for every American at an affordable cost by the president. She and her task force are going to present the legislation to the president. The president's going to present it to Congress and the American people, and we're finally going to get action on health care.
George Stephanopoulos, Peter Flaherty, thank you both very much. We're going to continue with this subject tomorrow, broadening it out a lot. I don't mean the health care. I do mean Hillary Clinton. I'll be back with a program note on that in a moment. Clinton, of course, than just her chairing of the health care issue.
Hillary Clinton is the next Princess Di in one sense, which I think she's on her way to becoming the most famous woman in the world.
Hillary Clinton really is every woman in the sense that she's trying to do what we're all trying to do, which is to have a home, to have a family, to have a decent marriage.
Tomorrow night, part 2 of Chris Bury's look at the First Lady's rising popularity and growing influence in her husband's White House. I'm Ted Koppel. That's our report for tonight. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been Nightline.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.